Let's talk about Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. I'm going to do a video game review here on the channel from a person who is a hardcore Dragon Quest fan and who's played most of the ones that I've been able to get my hands on throughout history. So the game came out, I believe December 1st is when it came out, and I was going to do my review a couple weeks ago. And you know what? I'm actually glad that I didn't, because a couple weeks ago I was less than halfway through the story. And then something happened in the story which may have changed my entire perspective on the game, or at least my entire perspective on the decisions that they made in this game. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. I'm not going to go into story spoilers, but I am going to say this. So this game, it's part of the Dragon Quest Monsters sub-series beneath Dragon Quest, the regular games. This is focusing, much like Pokemon, on catching monsters, training them, and building teams. That's pretty much how it works. The difference is that with Pokemon, you've got 6 Pokemon on either side, and you have one-on-one battles or two-on-two battles. In this game, you have 4-on-4 battles with 8 monsters, 4 that are actively fighting and 4 on the back burner, 4 like on your side, your bench basically, and you can swap them in and out. Plus, you have other monsters that you catch along the way in your inventory that you can pull from later on. So the main difference between Dragon Quest and Pokemon is that while Pokemon focuses a lot on building up your Pokemon and eventually evolving them to higher forms, that's not how it works in Dragon Quest. In Dragon Quest Monsters, the main reason or the main crutch of getting higher levels is using what's called synthesis, aka fusing. You take 2 monsters, you fuse them together, and you make a stronger monster out of it. And that requires a totally different type of strategy, because each monster has a set of talents, abilities. And within those talents, you've got different kinds of attacks, defense, you've got HP, MP bonuses, and you've got, of course, spells, both cure spells and attack spells. So as you're building up your team, you have to keep in mind that when you synthesize, you'll be able to pick the best talents from each parent, and they're actually called like parent-child, even though they're not actually having weird hentai sex. That's not what's going on here. You're literally fusing them together, but it uses the phrase parent and child to keep it simple. So the child has the potential to be stronger, and usually is, with the best abilities of the parents. And that requires a different type of strategy than you would playing a regular Pokemon game. I think people who have played Pokemon will find it pretty easy to transition over to Dragon Quest Monsters. You can also equip each monster with an accessory, as well as you've got your own inventory of items, including stuff that helps you catch monsters, recruit them, as well as obviously items to help heal and, heal MP, HP. Also, you can even attack. There are even items that the main character can use to attack the other monsters. Because remember, it's monster versus monster warfare in this game. It's not human versus monster like in regular Dragon Quest games. So that's pretty much how it works. What happens in this game is you're going from these different realms, these different dimensions in the dark world of Naderia, and you are solving problems and, defeating a certain enemy or a certain boss, I guess you could say, and then the story progresses. The thing is, it does get a bit formulaic as it goes on, because by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th one, you kind of know what you have to do. You kind of know you can go to one place to get like items and things like that. There's like a shop usually in most of these, not every level. Then you've got a big dungeon, so you have to go through the little area. Then you get to the dungeon or the castle, then you have to go through that. And it's pretty much rinse and repeat for several, there's a bunch of them in this game, man. I didn't even count, but there's a bunch. Now, when it comes to the story, here's why I'm glad that I reviewed it now and not before. So let me go into what I mean by this. So previously, as I'm playing through the game, this story is essentially acting as a bit of a prequel to Dragon Quest IV. But instead of playing as any of the main characters in that game, the Chosen Ones, you're playing as the main villain of that game, Pizarro the Manslayer, otherwise known as Necrosaro in the old translation. So you're playing as a younger version of him, and the game sort of takes you through how he gets all these monsters to be loyal to him. Because if you play Dragon Quest IV, you know that the monsters are all loyal to him. In fact, in all the Dragon Quest games, the monsters are loyal to the villains, but they never really tell us the other side of the story, and this game tried to do that, and I thought that was refreshing. I thought it was new. I thought it was something that I want to see more games do things like this. However, as I kept playing, there was a very interesting twist more than halfway through the game that changes everything. Now, I am not going to give my opinion on this because I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it, and I'm curious about talking to other Dragon Quest fans about it because, first of all, originally, in my original review, I was going to say that you don't have to play Dragon Quest IV to understand the story of this game, but it helps. That's out the window. At this point, if you haven't played Dragon Quest IV, whether it be the original NES version or the DS re-release, which is out of print right now, so you'd have to get the ROM if you haven't played it, there are parts of this story that are going to be lost on you. This game was made for the Japanese audience that played Dragon Quest IV. End of story. It's kind of like playing a sequel to a game, but the sequel requires you to have knowledge of the original game, and sometimes that's not as strong as you would think. For example, you can play Resident Evil 2 without having to play Resident Evil 1 because there's context clues. In this game, there are sequences and cutscenes that reference things in Dragon Quest IV that if you haven't played the game, you will have no idea. They don't explain it. They don't go into detail. It's just scenes from that game that the more familiar you are with that game, the more you'll understand this one. And I feel strongly about this because I'm looking at it from an objective perspective outside of being a Dragon Quest fan. If I didn't know what these things meant, I wouldn't understand what the hell was going on. Now, that may work to serve to create a chemistry, not a chemistry, it's the wrong word, but to create an interest, a curiosity. That's the word I was going to say. To create a curiosity to play for, I still think it helps if you play Dragon Quest IV first and then play this game. It's really important. Like, normally I would not even care that much. Most games don't really do that. This one, though, it's important. They just don't fill you in on anything. They just don't. So, overall, the story, though, took a very interesting twist. I'm not going to comment on it. That may have changed things. There are some recontextualization of events in Dragon Quest IV. There's also some interesting reveals of things that, happen not behind the scenes at 4, but while parts of this game take place during the time of Dragon Quest IV, literally during the time that you're questing with the main character in that game. So I don't want to spoil it because it's probably a pretty great moment. There are some moments in this game that are for the fans. I don't want to ruin it for them. Just know that if you've played 4 and if you remember the game relatively well, you don't have to remember every detail, but if you remember the game relatively well, you'll appreciate this story a lot more. I thought the character designs in this game were phenomenal. Toriyama, the designer of the game, the creator of Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump and stuff like that, he did the art for this game, and some of the designs in this game are phenomenal. Some are weird as hell, but some are great, especially with the villains. Does a great job with that. I enjoyed the cast quite a bit. They were fun. There are some disappointments though. There's a couple of dungeons in this game that are really, really annoying, and I mean annoying. Like, remember how everybody said that the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time was like the worst dungeon in the whole game? My friends warned me about it, and then when I played Ocarina of Time and got to that dungeon, I didn't have that many problems. Well, the water dungeon in this game has this crazy puzzle that took me hours to figure out. Hours, yo. And that's one dungeon. And that really annoyed me. There's a couple of dungeons that are like this. They kind of start off being pretty straightforward, and then they get to just getting to the point where you're just infuriated. Also, there is a degree of grinding in this game, really around the middle of the game. By the end of the game, I was super powerful, so it wound up, it's weird because early in the game, you don't have to be that strong. Then right around the middle of the game, you really do have to grind. I remember I lost my first fight in the middle of the game. And that's when I realized, okay, maybe I'm underleveled. So I trained more and I wound up winning, but then the game kind of, got a little bit easier as you went along. The last couple of bosses aren't that easy, but before then, I didn't really have that much trouble. So, but also, I was also a better player. I had better monsters. I had better abilities. So it is balanced like that. I will say that the post game, after I beat the game and I basically did some of the post game, I looked into what else was in there, is a huge letdown compared to other Dragon Quest games, especially the older Dragon Quest Monsters game on the DS and 3DS. Those games, the Dragon Quest Monsters Jokers games, those were fun, and those had crazy like post game areas to find, all kinds of rare monsters. In this game, it's much much smaller and much more straightforward, and it's just not like there's one big boss to overcome and a bunch of little side quests, and the little side quests can get a bit tedious, meaning finding mini medals or finding these scrolls, and some of it is interesting, some of it is not. Me, I've got other games I have on my backlog I have to play, so I'm probably not going to do all of the bonus stuff. I'm probably going to do just the boss and a couple of things here and there, the arenas and things like that, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Also, something else they should be aware of is that this is the first Dragon Quest game to have online capabilities as far as the Monster series goes, which means that you can challenge other players and their teams. That's interesting. I haven't tried it yet, but there you go. Overall, though, this game was a fun time. I put a lot of hours into it. I don't regret it, although it could have been a lot better, especially near the end. It does seem to kind of trail off, and it does kind of feel like they could have done more with it. But I think your enjoyment of the game is really going to come down to how much you kind of grew up with Dragon Quest and understand its mechanics and how it works, and how much you really like and are familiar with Dragon Quest IV. Those are my thoughts. Hopefully that illustrated the point to you. Take care and play Dragon Quest IV. Even if you don't plan on getting this game, play that game at least, because it's a classic. Take care.